All right, good morning or afternoon or evening. Welcome to 525. This is our first flipped um, classroom session. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to free up a lot of time to be able to do some of the things that we want to in the classroom and get rid of some of the nuts and bolts back at home, and also probably make you a more efficient reader. But I'm really excited about it. We'll see how it goes. Right now, this is 525, and on our Yammer site, you can pull up our syllabus, and we'll go over some of that right now. The purpose of today's goals is to go ahead and let's get the syllabus taken care of. Let's go over some of the assignments, specifically the journaling assignments, which are your web quizzes. And then we're going to go over chapter 1 so that you'll be ready to come in and do some of the application. Prior to that, I want to talk a little bit about this new model. It's a bit of a change, especially for summer school, and so that you'll know exactly what to do so that you're prepared for the class. But anyway, I'm really excited about it. I'm in my office, as you can kind of see. So settle in, get your textbook, and we'll be good to go. Feel free to pause this at different times because there'll be some assignments. But we'll go over that a lot more. Right now, exactly what is flipped? Basically, what we've done in the past is you read the chapters, and then supposedly you read the chapters, and then you come to the classroom and we go over the chapter, and then we'll have like a web quiz on the chapter or a test on the chapter, and then we move on and wash, rinse, repeat, and do it again. It concerned me because I think there was a fair number who weren't really reading the text, or not doing it in a manner that made a lot of sense. And the treatment for that was, come on guys, read your text, read your text, read your text, or here's a web quiz, or doing something like that. And it really didn't work very well. Maybe this is product placement. But so I was thinking, you know what, that's kind of a smart thing for them to do, to not read the chapter, because if they come in, then the professor will tell them exactly, what to read and what the important parts are, and then they can go back and they can redo it. So this way we're going to kind of flip it, because in the previous, what they would do is they would kind of bring in some sort of application to do at home, or when you're away from class. And I want to kind of flip that, where we do the lecture part now, while you're reading the text, and then we come into class and we do a lot of the application, and that frees me up to kind of problem solve, work in small groups, kind of help you if you have some skill deficits. I'm really excited about it. So we're just really kind of flipping it. Instead of read at home, lecture in the class, and then application back at home, we're flipping it and making it application in the classroom, and then the lecture part is done basically at home. So anyway, let's start off now with the first goal is to kind of go over our syllabus. And in 525, this is your evidence-based language arts instruction. It's designed to complement the 519. That's why we are a bit of a stickler, saying, no, you got to have 519 prior to 525. 525 has two purposes. One is to teach you the comprehension skills necessary, the reading comprehension. So it's not necessary teaching to read. This class that you had that in 519 is, okay, we're going to have strong phonics base. Right now, what we're saying is, now we need to, how can you use text to construct new meaning, to acquire new information, and those kinds of things. And so the reading comp part is more of reading comprehension in content areas. So how can I use a science book to gain new meaning? We know a lot about what works and what doesn't. The second part of this particular class is designed to expose you and bring your skills to some sort of mastery on the kind of the most adopted basal reading programs, language arts programs in the state of Virginia. So we're going to systematically kind of look at Scott Forsman, reading mastery, some open court, imagine it, You know, we'll look at reading streets, and then we'll do some real systematic training with that. So I'm really excited about this class. I think it's a good class. I think it's a very practical class. In the summer, it's a pretty intensive class, but I'm pretty sure you can handle it. Okay, so I've kind of gone over the course description and the course objectives. The textbooks for this class are your old friend, the Comenius and Carnine and Coyne Effective Teaching Strategies that Accommodate Diverse Learners. Remember in the 322 class, or for some of you in the CNI or initial licensure, the 540 class, you use that to develop rubrics for math, science, and social studies. Yes, I can hear the groans. But you know, that really introduced you to those 6 design principles. You know, big ideas. Here we go. We can do it in the choral response. Conspicuous strategies, mediated scaffolding. So you became very comfortable with that, and you developed these rubrics, and you became very proficient, hopefully, at identifying what constitutes a good, solid math, science, and social studies curriculum. Well, we're going to take the same textbook now and take a look at the writing and the reading, and some of the spelling portions of that text. So I sure hope you kept that text. We asked you to. And no, you won't develop rubrics as part of this class for language arts. There was great rejoicing. But you are going to. I do have a few rubrics, and I do want you to run these various programs that we're going to look at through the rubrics as part of our compare and contrast in our training. Excuse me. So now, that's the purpose of the Coyne textbook. The vaccach has been around forever. I think it's in its 10th edition now. Yeah, it's clear right there. And it is just a very good textbook on content area reading. And content area reading is what I was talking about before, is reading in content areas, science, social studies, language arts, for meaning. You know, that's kind of what we start doing in mid-3rd grade, definitely by 4th grade, is we're out of that learning to read and we're into that reading to learn. And you know, you have to be very proficient because some of you are going to teach middle, high school, upper elementary grades, and where our students are really using text to you know, to gather information. And sometimes the exceptional learner and the below average learner, and sometimes an average and a sophisticated learner doesn't have very good techniques for using textbooks and for gaining meaning. So hopefully we'll, you know, kind of increase those skills with you. The 3rd textbook is going to be this RTI Culture for Diverse Learners. I really like this book because it's not really the traditional textbook. There's 15-some pages that talks a little bit about RTI, but what it does a really good job of, it gives you a whole lot of techniques to use at a Tier 1, Tier 2, and a Tier 3 level. These tiers, as we go into RTI, we'll go a little bit in Chapter 1, but we'll go into much more as we progress through the course. You know, 3-tier models, multi-tiered support systems are going to be more and more prevalent, more and more important in our schools because it's going to affect not only eligibility and SPED, and that's of great debate, but it is also going to be the basis for progress monitoring and what services all kids receive is going to be tied into this system, and your skills have to be proficient. And I know you get bits and pieces of it, but we're going to go into this a little bit more into detail. Got a lot of this in 320 and 540. Right now, we're going to apply it, and so this resource, you know, the RTI for diverse learners is a great, because you just look it up and there's activities that you can do. Hey, here's the problem that I'm experiencing. This kid is definitely a Tier 2, and then it kind of goes over, here's what you should do, here are the materials, here's how you progress monitoring. So it's very, very interesting text. These are your knowledge, skills, and dispositions that are important. They are aligned with our CEC special education standards and also Longwood's teacher candidate competencies. That's important stuff for us. I don't know how important that alignment is to you, but what is important is this is our pledge. When you walk out of here, here are the things that we anticipate you'll possess. And it's broken down into what knowledge you have, what skills, and overall how does it change your disposition. So, course requirements, that's what a lot of you are mostly interested in. Um, there will be quite a bit of group work, at a graduate level. We want to mimic as much as possible authentic situations, and there is isolation work that you do as a teacher, clearly, but a lot of your work is done as a group. So there's going to be program training. The groups are going to kind of take a look at the various programs that we have, and you're going to develop a professional development training session for the other groups. We are a small group this time, so it should be kind of interesting how we're going to do this. But we'll talk a lot more about that, but you will train in the program that you selected. We do want you guys, I do want you guys to go and interview a teacher. That can be done as a group so that we're not running around and using a lot of time, and effort for these teachers doing, individual interviews. But we'll go as a group and specifically what we're looking for is a teacher that is actually using the program that you are engaged, that you have selected. So if you've decided to take Reading Streets, Scott Forstmann Reading Streets, then you're going to want to kind of go in and talk to a teacher who's actually used it for several years so that they can give you a great deal of insight into what this program can and can't do, how they supplement, how some problems they run into, how they progress monitor, the results that it's getting, those kinds of things. So it should be pretty interesting. The third thing are these web hard copy quizzes that are going to be infused within these flipped classrooms. We'll stop several times and I'll ask you to do some journal writing and those kinds of things. Go and explore a certain website, write some reflections. There's also some, typical question and answer responses. All right, then rubric evaluation. You are going to grab this again. You're going to provide you with the rubric. It'll be very similar to the rubrics that you developed in 322 and 540. But basically, you're just going to go in and you're going to run the program as a group, the program that you selected through the rubric. It's very comparable to what you did with your rubrics in 540 and 322 in math, science, and social studies, and see how they fare. And then the authentic part in the class, we're going to do a lot of case studies, and you as a group will go through that case study. It's usually, here's a situation, what are you going to do? And it should be fairly interesting, but those case studies will be done in class, because I won't have to go through the lecture quite as much, and so that's kind of nice. And that's really the bulk of our class, is the face-to-face class is going to be with these authentic kind of case studies. And that's great, but you're going to be at a huge disadvantage if you don't go through this that we're doing right now. You won't be able to participate. And so the last thing, of course, is we're going to have a couple tests, and those will be take home. Program training is 15 points. Your teacher interview is 10 points. The various quizzes are 10 points. Rubric evaluation is 10 points. The case studies throughout the class is going to be 15 points. You do have a couple compare and contrast papers. You've got 2 textbooks. You've got the Coin and the vaccach, and they address some real common things, whether it's language arts or reading or something along those lines. And specifically, I'd like for you guys to compare and contrast their views. You'll find a lot of overlap, and you'll find some dissimilarities. And being able to kind of highlight those. There'll be 2 compare and contrast papers for you folks who have already done 689. This is a piece of cake, because you just kind of get right down to it. I don't expect 20-page papers, but I expect you to be very clear in your writing and thinking. So it will be vaccach chapter 7 versus Coin chapter 4, and then the second one is vaccach chapter 9 versus Coin chapter 5. Tests are going to be 20 points. So it's 10 points each, and then we do have a final exam. Grading scale is what you're fairly typical what you're used to. I do expect you to attend all classes. This is a condensed summer session. So, you know what, guys? You got to be here and you got to work something out with me if you can't. 10% of the classes, if you miss, it's going to be a letter grade, but possibly if we can't work something out. But the bottom line is if you miss 25% of the class, whether it's excused or unexcused, um, you know, there's a real likelihood that you're going to have to fail this class. Honor code, without saying, we expect you to be on your honor. You will be taking tests at home. It's a privilege that you students have earned. You abuse that privilege and we'll have no alternative but to proceed in what's prescribed when these violations occur. But we won't have to worry about it. Disability policy is very clear. We work very closely with the Longwood University Learning Center. And my goal, personal goal, is for you to be able to show me what you can do. And fair is not equal in many ways, and so we definitely want to be fair, and we'll definitely work with you on any of that. Course schedule is laid out today, and this particular session we're going to go over chapters 1 of VACA. I won't be doing so much of a flipped. Remember, the coin is more background. You should feel very comfortable with you've read about 3/4 of this text, so reading, and many of you have already read the language arts in writing and spelling. So we won't go as much. We'll do some refresher, but the VACA is the intensive part that we'll be doing with these video lessons. We'll briefly go over on 618 the 6 major principles of instruction, and then we'll go into the literacy matters and the culturally responsive teaching. That's chapters 1 and 3 in VACA. Basically, by doing some case studies, you're infusing that information. If you come to class and you're expecting to be very passive and sit and, me go over in a PowerPoint, these various chapters, that's just not going to happen. You are expected to have used this video as a tool in conjunction with your reading and being prepared prior to. And if you're not, then, we'll have to sit down and talk about it. So we'll do those case studies, and then you will turn in your journals and your quizzes that are a part of this lesson here. And then we can go through this. The first test will be 620. The second test will be 626, so you can see there's very little time in between, and our exam is 712, sorry. And there shouldn't be any continuation projects after this class. Once this class on the 12th is done, it should be done, and we're good to go. All right. So there's a bibliography there that you can kind of take a look at. Many of you have been talking, but I would kind of say it's a little dated, but I would take a look at Bonnie Grosson's The Big Accommodation Model. That is a pretty impressive piece of work there. And of course, this fellow right here, and I believe he's from University of North Carolina, Wilmington. He's really interesting. If you want to go and I'll put this up on the screen, if you want to go, and he is eccentric and he's very opinionated, and I think very, very, very intelligent. But you should probably go to his website and start reading some of his work. He is an interesting character. And of course, anything from Master Prieri and Scruggs, you should be reading a lot. And Carnine and Silbert, they're just pretty brilliant too. But, this is definitely not an exhaustive list, but it is where, you can kind of start. So, if you have any questions about the syllabi or the assignments, feel free to kind of email me, and we'll get started with that. So we've so far now taken care of what is a flipped classroom and the syllabus. I want to talk a little bit about the journaled assignments, and and let's get into the chapter. So journal assignments and the web quizzes, I'll have some from time to time, some various flashcards that are going to pop up, and it'll be a question that you need to answer. Again, I guess you could change your answer if you want to, but really, you're on your honor, and I'll flash up the question. You choose the right answer, and then mark yourself accordingly. We do have some journal assignments, so you will need to get a journal, something that you can write in, or of course it can be electronic. If you have iPads, which I think is great. So I would encourage you to do that too. You can submit that electronically, or you can use your laptops or any of those things. So basically, we'll stop and you'll write on a particular prompt that's directly from vaccach. All right, so those are the things that we're doing. It's time to kind of get started with our content instruction now. So what I have coming up now is a electronic copy of our textbook, and I've taken the liberty of highlighting what I think are some important parts, but clearly it's up to you how you highlight and do your learning. But it's kind of a guide. So now we're going to get through chapter 1, and hopefully this will help us. So frame of mind, basically let's kind of think about what it is that we're going to try to accomplish by reading this chapter. We definitely got to get a handle on the difference between content and process knowledge. Are they synonymous? Is there a difference? Yes. So we need to understand that what is that difference? There's also a lot of new literacies. Just in the last 10 years, we've seen, is our Twitter's literacy, our tweets, literacy, is Facebook literacy. Conventional wisdom is, it is, and these electronic mediums are part of it. But we need to kind of understand what are these new literacies and how are they changing how we think about literacy in the 21st century and the students that are coming in. I mean, your generation is probably the first generation that is inundated and has grown up with this electronic medium at your disposal. Clearly, your kids are going to grow in that reliance on these kind of new or alternative literacies. So, us being able to infuse and embrace what they have to offer and also some problems that are associated with them is going to be pretty imperative for kids being able to use those literacies to acquire new information. What is adolescent literacy and why is it important in the 21st century? Why do many adolescents have difficulty comprehending academic texts? It's not just exceptional learners, but we want to kind of gain an understanding of that. How are content literacy and disciplinary literacy alike? And how are they different? And we'll go into that a great deal. Why is reading to learn and meaning making a strategic process? What comprehension strategies are critical to reading to learn? And what role does background knowledge or prior knowledge play in comprehension? When we say prior knowledge, you can kind of bring that into the coins background knowledge and being able to access that. So we also have some key terms that are important. These are in your text, and while I won't be reviewing them in the sense of, okay, what is content literacy? It's embedded in the instruction, and so by the end of this chapter, you should have a very clear understanding of what they mean. There are some that clearly you do know, and that should be pretty easy. But there might be some that are confusing to you, and you need to, what is the difference between content, disciplinary, adolescent? Is that part of the new literacy? So hopefully by the end of this chapter, you should be able to get that. So, okay, that's what we're going to try to get taken care of, but let's start now with this notion of content and process. There are two sides of that same instructional coin, so it's really kind of interesting way of saying that. But they do have an impact on student learning. Teachers who kind of achieve, what are they? So let's just start with basically what affects a teacher's ability or a student's ability to learn. In 689, we'll take a look at that in visible learning, and we'll look at some of those meta-analysis studies. But right now, this is kind of a precursor to that for those that haven't taken it. But really, if we start taking a look at all these variables that affect students' ability to learn, what are some that are pretty critical? And one is teachers, if we're talking about science, teachers who have a major and a minor in science or produce students who do better than teachers who don't. Okay, let's think about that valuable wisdom for just a second. Uh, Kids do better if they're taught by teachers who actually have some knowledge of the content that they're teaching. Okay, it doesn't sound like rocket scientist stuff, but in the age of alternative accreditation, you can take this praxis test and you're deemed highly qualified, even though your courses in that particular discipline may be lacking. If you're accredited, you're accredited. I mean, if you're certified, you're certified. If you're deemed highly qualified, you're deemed highly qualified. Yeah, is that the best thing? So, you know, if you have good, solid skills in that content or knowledge base in that content, you tend to do better. So take that in stride when we start saying, are you, in your discipline, or would you be a good elementary? Sure, because your content, an elementary teacher, because your content instruction is lockstep with elementary ed's in many ways. And so you have that training and that expertise. But does an elementary ed teacher with devoid of any instruction with exceptional learners, are they going to? Well, probably not. Not as much anyway. It's going to affect student outcome. So the major and minor your training is important. And that's not to say you have to get degrees or be degree collectors. But if you find out that you're going to be in a certain classroom in a certain content and you're concerned about it, you better start lining up your professional development with your current needs. And if your school's not providing it, well, guess what? You're on your own. Go do it. And start working to prepare yourself. It's not just having the piece of paper, but it's what entailed obtaining that piece of paper. And you don't have to just do it through courses and things like that. There's lots of ways, but just going in and winging it, okay, you can get through the day. It might even be enthusiastic, but guess what? Students' performance is going to kind of suffer. Students have to be engaged in hands-on activities, which goes in line with higher order thinking activities. Now, let's put that in perspective. If we know that engaging in some of this higher order thinking, and sometimes that's enhanced, sometimes not, by hands-on activities, which I think it's a bit more application activities is probably a better way of phrasing that. Look, the logic is, well, let's just do everything in a real authentic, experiential kind of way. Let's just really move to that real kind of discovery learning, Montessori, kids discover stuff, well, yes and no. I mean, again, I use the analogy, we don't learn about electricity by giving kids a bunch of wires and saying, look, go discover electricity. What we need to do is have this nice balance between, do they possess the background knowledge, the prerequisite skills to be able to benefit, to be able to participate in this authentic process. So our classroom, in this flipped classroom, is going to be very authentic, very hands-on, hopefully stimulating higher order thinking, because you're going to have to apply some of the skills. But I haven't neglected the very important hands-on background knowledge, of teaching very explicit, systematically, what's important. It's not because I just want you to think my way, although that's perfectly okay. It is more important to, okay, here's a way, now let's splinter. But if you don't have that one way, it's very hard to splinter in sometimes, or to go off in different directions. So people that are saying, okay, it has to be all systematic explicit, or it has to be all authentic, they're messing with your head some, but it's where and when. And in initial acquisition, we probably need to be pretty systematic and explicit. Here's what I want you to do. Here are the parts of the microscope. Here's the things that you can and can't do with that. Now, once you've got that, now let's go explore some stuff. Here's some swamp water. What are you finding? But, if I don't understand basic elements that are going to be incorporated into that, that are in that swamp water, I'm fumbling, and I'm not, even though I might stumble upon it, it's really not that efficient. So there's also a fair chance that I won't be able to do those assignments. So background knowledge, in short, is critical. But if we just stop there and get kids to mastery, okay, they know the parts of the microscope. Now we're going to go and learn this next stuff. Now we're going to learn, so we worked real hard to get this knowledge, and your reward is you have this other set of knowledge. Think of it in traditional spelling instruction that's not linked to word families or any text that you're going to read. That includes this new vocabulary. If it's just random words that are put there, well, they become very important, and you study them or cheat, and then you take the test, and then you forget about them. If they're not linked to something, then it's just dreadful. It's awful. But if you're linking the spelling words to certain word families, or if they're the new vocabulary in a passage that you're getting ready to read about, and then you come across it, there's no meaning to learn how to spell these words, then I would kind of not do it, or I'd find a very efficient way to get through the assignment. I think a lot of students would do that, but it's the same thing here. Is that if we just go in and just teach this content, and to master it, and we never get a chance to apply it in a hands-on activity that involves higher order thinking, okay, we're not going to see the value in it. But if we teach to mastery, and they've got it, and then we provide them wonderful opportunities to apply these skills, and they're like, now I know why I learned this. Now I understand why I'm teaching this. I was taught this strategy, or I learned this background information because now I can use it. Students start to value more. So in short, yeah, students who engage in high hands-on activity and students who engage in higher order thinking, yeah, they're going to do better, but they're going to do worse if they don't have any background knowledge. So it's a balance. Teach to mastery, then apply. Remember your lesson plan format of modeling, guided practice, independent practice. Hello, you're at mastery. Now stop. Don't go into the next content. Do enrichment enhancement, which is application, and then let's find some way to progress monitor these. And if you don't have all of those components in your lesson plan, then it's going to affect student performance. The last one here is teachers with professional development and working with special populations. Huge, huge, huge. We're seeing some real interesting kind of data that's coming out where teachers who get professional development working with special populations, especially in math, and I'll share that study with you later on in the lesson, they improve a grade level. So that's a huge effect size. So it's really exciting to see, and this is anyone. It's not just exceptional learners, and special populations don't just mean special ed. We have some ELL kids, we have some gifted kids, but if you have professional development working with these special populations of kids, guess what? You do better. So anyway, very exciting, and again, hopefully you're taking a few notes. But I do want to go now a little bit into your text in this content and process. What to teach is content, and then how to teach it is process. So it's a real simple way of determining the difference. And you've got to think about both. What to teach, and then how am I going to teach that? So what to teach, think about it for a little bit. What are some things that will help me decide what I'm going to teach? SOLs, the high stake the high stake goals and the assessments that follow the SOLs. Is probably a good indicator that your curriculum should be aligned with that SOL. It doesn't mean that's all you have to teach. You can expand on that. Remember, SOLs are guides, and we discount all the time a kid's ability to generalize content that they've mastered. So we think we've got to, everything has to be just lockstep, teach all of this, drill and kill. And during initial acquisition, it's important that they get that information. But then we forget that these are kids. Kids take, and adults most of the time, take information that they've learned and they apply it into new situations. You sure do. You're taking what you learned of how to sit in a classroom and you're applying it now to this unique situation. We're not starting from scratch. You're taking some of those same skills that you did in the lecture, in a face-to-face lecture, and now hopefully you're applying it, even though some of you are eating popcorn now and drinking whatever, and maybe you're in your fuzzy slippers. I mean, there's changes, but you're using some of the exact same skills and you just generalize them to a new setting. Now, how to teach, we spend a lot of time on thinking, doing what is it that we want to teach, but we don't spend as much time on, okay, how am I going to teach this? What is that process? Yes, we want to give you that guide of that lesson plan, model, give a purpose. Why are we doing this? Model that skill you're trying to teach. Now let's guide students, give some guided practice. Don't just sit back and say, okay, go to independent practice. Guide them during that very tentative initial acquisition. Now let's give them some independent practice where you're just you're not sitting there and answering your email or updating your Facebook status. You are coming in and you are, milling around, looking for individuals or small groups that are having some problems, reteaching some lessons, validating what they're doing, giving some clues, challenging to go further, certain individuals or groups. But some of that nice independent practice that really kind of helps. And then we go into, our, when we're at a mastery level, now we're going into the more application. Those enrichment and enhancement activities where we've got it now, let's go in a totally different direction, see if these skills are going to generalize to another setting, and then come up with your evaluation. But you've got your process. So there we are. This is the kind of study that we were looking back from ETS here, is that student achievement increases 40% of grade levels in math and science when teachers have majors and minors in the subjects. So huge. The study found that students who engage in hands-on activities and respond to higher-order thinking questions outperform their peers more than 70% of a grade level in math and 40% in science. So that's just huge. If we just go to mastery, okay, they'll do all right. They might be able to get a 420 on an SOL test in that particular particular discipline. But if we provide some of that enrichment, enhancement, hands-on, it looks like an effect size of like 0.3, 0.4, more. I mean, we really increase. And then teachers who receive professional development training and working with special populations, they outperform by a full grade level. Okay, digest that. If they understand how to work with special populations being defined as exceptional learners or gifted or a certain ELL group, or it could be a variety of characteristics, but special populations, then if they get, okay, how do you work with this particular population? It could be impoverished kids, it could be minority kids, it could be males, it could be females. How do you work with these kids? Boom. Kids do so much better. So the time that you invest in learning how to do that is really beneficial. So please think about that during your professional development. So now, one of the things that it becomes very critical in being able to do that is that you've got to sit down and carefully organize your materials and instructions based on background knowledge, their prior knowledge. The only way that we can get their prior knowledge is through assessment and progress monitoring. So these folks that are running around saying, well, we test kids too much, we assess kids too much, it almost makes it equitable for kids, it's much more efficient, and we're not wasting their time if we do good, solid progress monitoring. You'll get no argument from me that, hey, look, if we're just running around, assessing kids and then not using that data, then that's a huge waste of time. What we want to do is we want to make sure that the assessment is used. So progress monitoring is critical because it assesses where they are, and if I'm getting ready to teach something that they don't possess the background knowledge, then I have to kind of question why I'm doing that. I mean, schools constantly are challenged by, I've got to teach this content because this kid's in 5th grade and these are the SOLs that are going to be assessed on, but yet this kid is 2nd grader. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And a lot of them make an erroneous decision of, I'm just going to teach the 5th grade content and I'll try to help them out. But it doesn't really work. It doesn't help them out. It's like me saying, I'm going to teach quantum physics because you need to know it and I don't know how to divide. I mean, I can teach it all day long and it could be great instruction and I'm not going to get it. So it's better, if I really want to get this kid to quantum physics, to teach where they are. And you can only teach where they are if you know what their prior knowledge is. And then engage that in student learning. We want to balance that content with the standards that your curriculum or your division is saying that you have to address. Do you know the standards in your content area? You know, and I'm not talking about your favorite area, so if you hate math, do you know the standards? You know, if you don't, you know where to find them. Virginia DOE, they're all there. And more than just knowing them, you have to make instructional decisions based on your authentic assessment. Hopefully you know what authentic assessment is, but it is that ongoing. We're not talking about SOL. You can break it down student performance by question, that's fine, and you can look at those various strands and see where as a grade or even as a student, you know, we are falling out, and you can make instructional decisions there. But that time has passed for those kids. You can find the gaps that your program or your instruction or your grade level are making, but if fix it for next year. But those kids that you moved forward still possess those gaps. And that's the problem with, summative evaluation. We want things that's more formative and it's authentic. So we see ongoing progress monitoring where we can see if this kid falls out and they are not getting it, that great CBA and CDM that you do, that is embedded in RTI, are they making that progress? If not, then okay, let's just kick in some tier 2 interventions and let's help. Well, what tier 2 interventions can I use? Well, you can come up with them, or you can use your resources. The case studies, we're going to become very proficient at being able to address some of those. But we really want to think about this systematically, not just our gut. When we just use our gut instinct or our with-itness or any of these terms, which I'm not sure we can quantify, as much as we'd like to, we need to have data that we can use. So once you know where a kid is, you understand your standards, and you know where a kid is, then we can integrate our, content literacy practice and strategies into instructional plans. But what if they don't know the strategies? Well, if they don't know it, what do we do? Systematic explicit instruction in that particular strategy. But they should know it already. They already should have it. But coulda, shoulda, woulda, whatever. They don't have it, or they're not proficient in it, or they've forgotten it because they haven't practiced it and it deteriorated, or they modified it in some way that makes it less efficient. Look, bottom line is, if they're not doing it, they're not doing it. We can talk about it all day long. We can blame video games and teachers and parents and society and the downfall of the Roman Empire. Look, whatever, you have no control over that. Here's the kid, they're looking at you, they don't possess that strategy, teach them to mastery, and then give them a chance to actually use that in authentic settings. But definitely build in those plans and strategies in your instructional planning process. Okay, so we want to know the standards, we want to make instructional decisions based on authentic assessment, and then we want to integrate literacy practice and strategies into your instructional planning and units of study. Okay. Sheet of paper time. Been talking a long time. Hopefully this is helping you somewhat. But I want you to kind of get your sheet of paper. We have our first question that I want you to kind of take a look at. Of the following characteristics, which is the most frequently identified by educators as characteristics of quality teaching? Okay, is it going to be enthusiasm for teacher, a thorough understanding of subject matter, skills to develop learning experiences that interest students, years of experience as a classroom teacher. So think of all these, and they have overlap. But which question, what's the correct answer? So write that on your sheet of paper. Okay. All right, second question. Okay, which of the following is not a finding of the ETS study, How Teaching Matters? Less attention needs to be paid to improving teacher pedagogical knowledge. Students' content knowledge is an important factor in student achievement. Classroom instructional practices influence student achievement. When teachers receive professional development, well, we missed that part. They do better. Okay. So get that taken care of. Alrighty, I'm going to move this down here and you can kind of look at this for a little bit. Apologize for D getting cut off. Hey, feeling good? Everybody happy? Alright, part of this is now we need to be able to define literacy. Literacy is pretty important. We need to make sure that we understand those terms. But prior to it, if you turn to page 6, sorry, page 5, we're going to come to our first response journal. Part of this is learning how to teach with text contributes significantly to the way we think about teaching, learning, and curriculum. So this whole notion that textbooks are bad, what? Yeah, you should take them off, the student's desk and put them on the, shelves. So I was like, did we do that in the 80s and 90s? And didn't our scores like really suck? I mean, didn't kids really suffer under that? But, I don't know where a lot of this comes from. I think it comes from maybe the frustration that teachers feel confined or tied to the textbook, and then not seeing the results that they need. So we say, okay, let's get rid of the textbooks, or just use them as resources. That's a good thing. Just use it as a resource, and well, yes and no. But I mean, if that's part of your comprehensive plan that you came up with, great. But leaving each individual teacher to do whatever they want to in their classroom and have that amount of autonomy sometimes can work very well for a very competent teacher, but for a lot of our teachers, it is a huge problem, especially if their training in the particular area that they're working on is lacking. Teachers don't always know everything. Neither does central office. Neither do college professors. Neither do students. But I think collaboratively, if you have a plan of how you're going to use these resources, that makes sense. But before you reject the textbooks, you need to know how to use them and how to accelerate student learning. So I want you to pull out your journal now, and you'll have to pause this, which is fine. What you want to do is you want to get your journal and you want to write, or you can type, however you want to do it. Not pages and pages, but just enough to answer the question. You'll bring this into class and turn this in. But basically, what do you do as a reader to make meaning and construct knowledge as you interact with a text? So this is just you as a reader. What do you do as a reader? Not a teacher. What do you as a reader when you're reading something? A content book, the book that you're reading right now. What do you do to make meaning and construct knowledge as you interact with the text? Well, everybody should probably, most of us, highlight stuff. That's one. But go deeper. What do you do to get something out of this? I mean, a lot of our students just kind of kick back. They read it. It's fine. Okay, I did it. And it hasn't benefited them. Purpose of reading is to gain new information. So what do you do? So just kind of list out those strategies. You can bullet them, but go ahead and list those out. All right, go do that. Put this on pause and go do that. Go on. All right. I assume that you've started this. You have either A, not been able to find your pause button and it's continuing and you're freaking out some, or B, you've answered that reflective journal, or C, you fell asleep and this video is just playing. So anyway, hopefully it's B and you've got that taken care of. Um, you know, I do want to kind of go back a little bit to this assign and tell practices. So defining assign and tell, um, specifically what is that, and what is passive learning. Um, Look, bottom line is if you are cool with passive learning, you know, it is going to cause a great deal of boredom in your classroom. But it's, you know, passive learning, and it's not always. Sometimes kids have to be passive. They can't always be active, especially sometimes in initial acquisition. But they really shouldn't go for extended period times of being passive. Kind of doing that here when I was trying to wrap my head around it. How do I get them not to be passive? Part of that is throw some questions up on a web quiz for a grade. That gets a lot of people's hearts moving. And I'm not pointing any fingers, but I can pretty much point out when you say, wait, quiz? What? No? Um, but, you know, get some of those quiz questions going on. But also, you know, get some writing that's active, you know, so that you're not so passive, gets you kind of thinking about some things. So I was trying to kind of wrap my head around why it's not just me talking and, you know, you are sitting here doing nothing. Um, you might be tempted to turn on the TV or listen to the radio or answer your IM. And if you're doing all of that or on Facebook, if you're doing that right now, cut it out. It's not working well for you. You think you're multitasking, but you know it's not doing well. So you're answering, you know, because I can see some. I'd say half of you right now have Facebook up and you're updating your status. And really, you're cheating yourself with that. You want to kind of focus here and interact. So when I'm asking questions, you can talk back. It's a little crazy, but you know you want to be active. Um, so when they do the passive learning, that you know, assign and tell more often not dampers the active involvement in learning and denies students ownership of the responsibility for the acquisition of content. So, you know, assign and tell often dampers, and it doesn't make them responsible. You know, it doesn't make them let's think about that for a minute. So I assign and then I tell them about it. Assigning and telling. You know, if I just buy my kids bikes all the time and they don't have to earn it, they don't take ownership, it's going to get left out in the rain. They're not going to appreciate the stuff they have. You know, if you got everything you wanted just by asking, you don't appreciate it. You know, and it's the same thing. Are we doing that to you in college, where we give you the book and then we give you the study guide and then we give you, you know, everything that you need to know in the form of a rubric to be able to handle a basic thing, and you just mindlessly fill that mess out? You know, are we denying you the responsibility, the investment? Because if you don't have an investment of, okay, what do I need to do to answer this question, to be able to do this? I know it causes anxiety. It's much more comfortable if you knew exactly everything to do, how to do it, what would make it perfect. That reduces your anxiety. I know that. You would love me for doing that. But I feel like I'm cheating you when that happens. You know, and there's a big temptation because sometimes, because I know, you know, you might get that in other places. And sometimes it can be, you get labels of, well, if you don't provide all those supports, then you're just being slack, you know, Professor Jones. Okay, I'll take that hit, you know. But the alternative is to provide you with so much support that I enable you, that I make you completely dependent on me. And, you know, that is just self-serving. You know, all I'm worried about is that you'll, you know, rate me high or think that I'm just. Look, bottom line is, I'm pretty much only interested in you being able to hit the ground running next year and not screw up kids. You know, that you are going to go in and be able to be a effective teacher starting day one. So it's really not about you. It's about those 20 faces, 15 faces, 10 faces, 102 faces that are facing you. Um, you know, because some of you might be teaching my kids next year. You know, and my wife and I would not be happy if everything was about you and nothing was about my kids. So, you know, bottom line is, I also, the second part of that is I have a great deal of confidence in you. You can do this. It boggles my mind how quickly you sell yourself short. So I'm wondering if with assign and tell, are we really saying, I have low expectations on you? I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. I'm going to assign it, and I'm going to grade based upon what I put out. Am I really saying you are incompetent? I think that's the message that comes across. But I do know one thing: it enables students. So what I want you to do is, this is your next assignment that you need to do for your web quiz, is in your response journal, pull that back out, okay? And think about when you were in middle or high school. Did you know students who were informationally impaired? What do you think some students, why do you think some students give up on reading and doing homework assignments? Okay, the easy one is you know, they don't think they're smart and stuff. But I want you to go deeper. I want you to go, again, it's a personal reflection. You know, it could be about you. But I want you to kind of go, why do kids give up? I want us to throw out these variables of parents don't care or, you know, society. I want you at the core to just, that student makes the conscious choice, I'm not doing my homework. I give up. I can't read. I want you to go and really get in the mindset of why they get to that point, why they give up on reading and doing homework assignments. And when you think you're done, put your pencil down and then, you know, go back and try to get a couple more. Go deep, okay? So, got to find the pause button again and take a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes. Stretch break is good right now, and then go and get started with it. All right. All right, so you're back now, and things are progressing well. You got 2 response journals. I'm pretty excited about this. And we're back to our, you know, defining literacy, which probably is important. But the term literacy has really changed a great deal, even in the last like 10 years. It used to be reading, what you got out of reading. But it's really kind of morphed and changed to a level of knowledge in a specific content area or subject area, and not just, okay, reading or language arts, but literacy in science and math. And more importantly now, and this is where it's really changed in the last 10 years, you know, is, okay, other than books. You know, literacy includes a variety of things. But, you know, a variety of means, you know, again, we kind of jokingly said the tweets, is that literacy? It is, you know. Is YouTube literacy? Well, that's video, but that literacy, there's components of it, you know. I mean, it's Facebook, you know, all of these means that we have at our disposal now. Are they literacy? Sure, you know. And we got to learn to be able to handle them, and more importantly, we got to know how to use them in our favor. But it really has come to kind of represent is this synthesis of language and thinking and contextual practices through which people make and kind of construct meaning. Well, what the heck does that mean? Is, okay, literacy is this pot that we put in the different modes, and then you've got your schema, which we'll talk more later in the chapter, but that is basically your background knowledge, and then you construct meaning based upon what you know about the world. You know, and that's a lot. That's very much different than, you know, in previous centuries, where literacy was just really how well do you read and write. It's so much more now because it's so much more than just reading and writing. I mean, literacy is how do you synthesize all of this information that you're bombarded with? And now it's so subjective. I mean, even the stuff that we've read before, I mean, everything is biased and people, try to put their own opinion. But now it's so polarized that, you have to be pretty sophisticated to be able to tease out illogical arguments. I mean, this is a higher order thinking. This argument makes no sense. John has a younger sister. Okay? John has a younger sister. John is 14. His sister is 18. Tease out, is that a logical or illogical argument or statement? And then why? That's the problem with passive learning, is that we don't look for illogical or just made up, information, inaccurate information, because we're not processing it, because we're very passive, and teachers make us passive, by, here it is, here's the information, now I'm going to assess. It is a huge problem if a kid stays passive, because I'm telling you right now, they are not engaging in that wonderful, kind of analysis that needs to take place. Okay, let's look at our next question now. Okay, so go back to your piece of paper where you had question 2, now it's question 3, and let's take a look at it. Using literacy-based learning strategies with context area text. So think about that process. Don't be passive and just read it. What is this question saying? Using keywords, literacy-based learning strategies. Literacy-based learning strategies with content area text. So what are we talking about? Literacy-based learning strategies, what we learn in reading classes, language arts class, in content area text. In the science class, so tear that part. See, I'm leading you too much. You can probably figure this, but I'm just modeling it. All right, so now take what we just did there of taking apart that question, try to answer it. Detracts from teacher's role as a subject area specialist. B, requires specialized training in literacy instruction on the part of a content area teacher. Or C, teaches students how to use writing, reading, viewing, and talking to learn content. It should be content area material. I'll work on these. Okay? All right, so what do you think it is? Detracts from teacher's role as a subject area specialist. Requires specialized training in literacy instruction on the part of the content area teacher. Teaches students how to use reading, writing, viewing, and talking to learn content area material. Okay, let's do the next one. All of the following statements are true about assigning and telling teachers practice, except that they, again, all of the following statements are true about assigning and telling teaching practices, except that they dampen active involvement in learning, deny students ownership of the acquisition of content, deny passive involvement in learning, deny students responsibility for the acquisition of content. So again, try and answer that question for me. All right, moving this down. Finish that up. All right. So let's put that away now. New literacies. We've been talking about this new influx of different types of literacy that students today are inundated with. But what are they? It's necessary for students to use information and communication technologies (ICTs), information and communication technologies, effectively. What are those? Okay. Those are some of those different means of learning that we kind of came up with. There are 5 functions to identify, navigate, critically evaluate, synthesize, and communicate. Okay, bring this in is that it's kind of a non-linear activity. If you think about your parents, they probably picked up a book or a magazine or an article or a journal article and they read from beginning to middle to end. And there's a certain linear process there, beginning, middle, and end. But if you think about the web, there is no middle. I mean, there is no beginning, there is no end. I mean, I don't know. Has anyone come to the end of the web? It's always kind of in the middle. And it allows that, how they find information is through links. And they're almost drilling down. So I view it as kind of a well as opposed to a road. Is that well has different tunnels and you go deeper and you kind of hang out in that tunnel. It's almost like this ant colony where you go down deeper and then you kind of follow a path and then you can go down deeper again and go into a different path. And you're constructing meaning, you're figuring out things, but it's very different than just following the road and I made it to Virginia Beach. The most efficient, effective way. I mean, you're going to get to Virginia Beach, but you're going to go through a lot of passes. Now, what you can kind of see is that it's going to take you a lot longer. But the wealth of information that you're going to receive is much more complex in nature. And if you synthesize it, you might find out that you really didn't want to go to Virginia Beach anyway, you just wanted to go here. Okay, and you got what you were looking for. The goal is some sort of entertainment, relaxation. Well, by going deeper and finding different passages, you might not have gotten to Virginia Beach, but you have accomplished your goal of some sort of relaxation or something. And I'm killing this analogy, but I think you know where I'm going with this, is that it is very much more intensive of having the abilities to process information or to synthesize through all of this rubbish. And so the skills are much more complex. So your parents had it easier. Here's the road, get there. Here's the book, get there. Now, let's talk about it. Whereas now we are just getting multiple sources of information and we have to process that. We need to navigate, but then we need to critically evaluate it. Wait a minute, this is ridiculous because critical evaluation, would entail saying, I don't buy this. This is ridiculous. But possessing the skills to be able to look at illogical arguments or manipulative arguments. I'm going to critically evaluate this information, but there's some truth. I can go to Fox and MSNBC, and somewhere there's elements of truth. O'Reilly might be saying something, Rachel Maddow might be saying the same situation, but my gosh, they're saying 2 different things. I've got to be able to extract, critically evaluate, and then synthesize this into some reality based upon my background knowledge. And then more importantly, I need to be able to communicate that back to someone. Well, here's what Maddow said, and here's what O'Reilly said, and here's some other things that I've seen based on these blogs and everything. And I'm going very deep. But for folks who just want the right answer, they just tune out. Screw it. Forget it. Everybody is, telling me something different. Well, heck, you get that in class here. Dr. Lacasio could say this, Dr. Braun could say this, and then here's Jones saying this. And it's 3 very distinct. Somebody tell me the right answer. No, you tell yourself that right answer. We're going to give you this take. We're going to provide you with information. And it's all meaningful. But you've got to be able to navigate between us the questions that you want to ask. You got to critically evaluate what it is that we're saying. Synthesize it. Look for those red flags of what you want to kind of talk about, and then communicate that. They help define the new literacies that are out there. Okay, this multimodal computer, this massive amount of information and communication technologies. This is imperative because they're just going to get more advanced and more sophisticated. We're not going to go back to everybody has a mailbox and they read the paper that shows up that they subscribe to that is based on their geographic location. I mean, you know this, but that sophisticated nature of navigating these ant tunnels as opposed to just riding on the road takes so much more critical thinking abilities. And if we as teachers just passively teach kids, then they're not going to navigate it. They're going to develop the mindset that many of you have is, tell me, Jones, what you want. What is it? And I'll do it. I don't know. I can give you information. But if you're willing to give over that power, hey, I'll tell you exactly what to think, what to do. I mean, do you really want Big Brother? Do you really have so little confidence in yourself of being able to handle this that you're willing to be passive? It's a very scary thing to produce individuals who are just waiting to be told what to learn, what answer they're supposed to come up with. The alternative is don't teach them anything. Just let them go explore. Both of those are ridiculous. Okay? Set the tone and then go. But also understand that these new literacies are force in your hand. Do you want to learn or do you want to be comfortable? Do you want to be safe? Do you want to be innovative and push boundaries and really challenge kids? Or do you just want a 400 on an SOL test? The 400 is important. 450 is better. 550 is great. But if they're not thinking, what are we really doing? If you're not thinking, you can't teach kids to think. So when you're evaluating this, when you're doing this, and you've got yourself these journal assignments, he needs to give me a rubric of what I need to write. No, you need to ask yourself, why? Why? Shoot, man, take me 3 minutes to generate a rubric and pop it up on the screen and say, here's what I want you to do. No, not interested in making you comfortable. I'm interested in you challenging yourself. So these new literacies are going to force your hand. Okay, so let's jump in now to these elements of effective adolescent literacy. So jump right over now, and we're on page 11. Okay. What is adolescent literacy to begin with? Okay, what are we teaching adolescents to read? Is that what we're talking about? No. Do we teach adolescents to read? Of course. There's always correction and remediation programs. But are we really trying, is what we're talking about here, talking about adolescent literacy programs? Not necessarily. What we're talking about is literacy as far as language arts and being able to get these kids to start thinking in literature terms, in reading terms. What do we need to have? Okay, well, right now, Reading Next, Carnegie, they put some stuff out that's okay. But they did come up with, look, in middle and high school, what needs to happen? Ooh, lo and behold, direct explicit comprehension instruction. Okay, that's definitely an initial acquisition, setting this up. Okay, it's got to understand summarizing stuff. Okay, what did you just read? That really helps in keeping a track of how much you understood. Okay, but there's lots of practices that need to be taught directly explicit comprehension instruction. How do I do these things? A lot of times the only difference, two kids, they decode great, they're brilliant, fluent readers. Listening to the read brings a tear to your eye. Ask a comp question to one, they can reel it off and expand on it. Ask a comp question to another, and they give you the explicit information that's in the text, but they can't really infer. Add another kid, I think I said two kids, so there's a third. Add another kid who's brilliant and very fluent, and they have no idea what they just read. And there's probably at times when you're all three of these people, Sybil, okay? Sometimes you read something and you go deeper. You jump into that anthill, okay? And you go off in different paths. I mean, it's great. There's other times you can regurgitate explicitly what you read. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. What year did Columbus sail the ocean blue? 1492. Okay? But you can't answer an inferred question. What did it feel like to be on the small ship, the large ship? What did it feel like 40 days into it? Okay? I'm not sure it lasted 40 days. I'm showing my deficits in social studies voyage of Columbus experience. But these kind of empathy questions take a much higher order thinking, empathy. Putting yourself in someone's position and then trying to ascertain how they were feeling based upon what they knew of the world, in 1492. I mean, that's pretty advanced. I mean, I guess you can be empathetic, but if you already know they're going to discover and you don't negate that information and really try to, put yourself in their position, you're not going to go quite as deep as the person who, is processing that voyage based upon the knowledge and keeping that at the forefront that they're going to make it, it's going to be fine. And that person gets much more than the person who just explicitly can regurgitate the answer because all they know is passive learning. So effective instructional principles embedded in content. So content area instruction, science, social studies, whatever, is using language arts teachers and their skills and the strategies that are taught in their content area classes. We've got to have some motivation and some self-directed learning where we build that motivation into it by hyping them up, by, lo and behold, giving them some freedom, some independence. Go and do something. I trust you, within reason. You're still responsible, but let them use some self-directed, especially if they've mastered an initial acquisition. There's no reason for you to be a helicopter teacher, okay? There's no reason whatsoever for you to be a helicopter teacher. So, give them some self-directed learning. Let your kids go play and explore if you've taught them the rules, okay? Within parameters. Text-based collaborative teams, that they are interacting. They've got a book. It's Oprah, in middle school. Let's have a read. And we've got to make sure that these kids read possess the background knowledge of being able to read, but let's now do something collaborative instead of just assessing on it. Strategic tutoring for those individuals that need it. That's at tier 2 instruction sometimes for these kids, and a lot of that can come from here or a variety of sources, So diverse texts, and diverse isn't only matched to the demographic variables assigned to a particular student. So what I'm trying to say is, African American students diversity isn't just African American texts. Clearly that's a huge component. But diverse means that they need to read about a variety of different individuals. We need to really push students to open their mind that there's great literature out there. It comes from people that don't look, don't act, don't talk like you. That's diverse, and that we also are including texts from folks that do look like you, have interests that you're interested in. This kid's interested in baseball, then he should read a lot about baseball. This person, has grown up on a farm, then being able to something that he or she can relate to, different crops, corn, textile, you know, this may be very interesting. But part of it is lo and behold, getting to know your students. So diverse doesn't just mean match to demographic variables and interest level of the participant who's reading. Diverse can be completely different than anything they've experienced before, mixed in sometimes with stuff that is just aligned with them. That's diverse. Not always, oh, these kids are from rural, I should only have books about farm. Well, yeah, of course you should have some, but then a book about the city makes a lot of sense because it expands their knowledge. Okay, intensive writing, a technology component, ongoing formative assessment, again, that has to be in there. Your CBAs, your CBMs. Not summative, and a test isn't it. It's pre-testing them. Where are they? Oh my gosh, they all know this stuff already. I'm going to skip ahead. Well, they don't possess the prerequisites. I'm going to go back and teach the prerequisites. Okay, extended time if needed. Okay, and look at those numbers, which includes approximately 2 to 4 hours of literary instruction practice that takes place in language arts and content area classes. Woo, that's a lot of time. PD for teachers. This is PD that you're experiencing right now. It's professional development. That's what your college is. Yes, it's designed to expand your mind, but it's also to provide you professional development in exactly the area and the field that you are going to pursue. If not, we're derelicting our duties, So I can expand your mind, but if you have zero skills and I'm sending you out there, that seems problematic to me. Ongoing summative assessments? Yeah. Wait, didn't you just say formative? And summative is bad? No, summative is bad when when you use it in a formative capacity. Summative is incredibly important. Summative, end of year, end of unit, SOL. That's fine because it can kind of give you an indication of overall, okay, how do we do? Let's fix this as a program. But the formative, that ongoing assessment, really helps a great deal in guiding your instruction. Okay, teacher teams so that they can plan. It's not just, woo, I got a break today. I mean, most teachers that I've seen, when they are given the tools necessary to plan and it's encouraged, they do a great job with it. Great things come from that time. Sometimes the best thing that we can do is just provide time for people to get together and to, talk about their craft. Leadership has to be part of that component. That the principals, the team leaders, the teachers, the students, there's leadership opportunities for individuals, and that those leadership opportunities are fully utilized. And then, sorry, programs are important. Okay? Oh no, I can teach reading through a Sears catalog. Not very well. I mean, you need to have a comprehensive and coordinated literacy program that has an evidence base to support its use. I don't care you got 50 million manipulatives free with it. You get what you pay for. If it doesn't have some sort of evidence-based quantitative measures that are sustained, effect size, some sort of, meta-analysis where we have a variety of studies and we can say, okay, this got an effect size of 0.48. 0.57. I mean, you've heard me, direct instruction, 0.79. The math is 1.1. It's 20 years worth of research. There's others that have good solid research and others that are emerging. But you need to have a comprehensive coordinated literacy program. And if you don't know what the evidence base is of your literacy program, you better go find out. And don't think that the administrators know that. I'm sitting talking with an individual that had a new math program that the division had bought, this principal, and didn't know the name of it. Okay? You have to take it upon your shoulders to be able to do that. All right. Gotta remember sometimes this intro to comprehension that some students sometimes lack prior knowledge needed to connect important ideas in text. Then what do? I mean, we know kids come in with gaps. Okay? and it affects their comprehension. Because they've got skill deficits. They don't know how to sequence. They don't know how to summarize. They don't get how to formulate author's purpose. Okay? And different authors write different ways. And so individuals who very literate students, they don't get how this author's how they're doing this. They're confused about how this text is organized. Here's a text that they just don't get it. There's too many pictures over here, and we go off in different directions, and they don't know how to organize it. Or the vocabulary is over their head. They don't. That's a prerequisite skill. Yeah, we introduce new words sometimes in bold text, but if they don't understand the words that are being used to describe the new words, it can be very problematic. And okay, then systematically teach it. You'll find it. If you're using formative assessment and everybody tanks on this concept, that's because there's some background knowledge that kids have as a whole are running into problems. Identify it. Guys, why did we get this correct? I didn't know what they were talking about. Well, what about this word? Here it is. Which ones of these don't you? Okay, great. Now pre-teach that vocabulary next time you get to that section in the text. Formative assessment will allow it. All you'll see is these kids tanked. Well, you can get mad at the kids, or it is the instruction that failed them. So go back, find out where they fell out, get those concepts, come up with a unit, a lesson to teach that, pre-teach it, reassess them. Now they've got it. Go ahead and include that in your basal so that next time you run into this, that you pre-teach that. Okay? So, again, they might lack the background knowledge. Great, teach it. They don't understand the author's line of reasoning. Expand that skill. Teach it. Or they run into words that they don't know how to pronounce, let alone, define. Teach it. Look, difference between these proficient readers and those who struggle is that and everybody struggles with the text, but when they struggle, the proficient reader, they come up with workarounds, different ways to answer that. Okay, that didn't work. Let me see if I can go this way. And they have that confidence, that self-efficacy, that they say, well, I don't really know how to do it, but I'm a pretty good student. I can figure this out. Good readers do that. Everybody runs into struggle. I don't know what this is. All right, let's go figure this out. Maybe I'm going to use a dictionary. Maybe I can Google it. Maybe I can look around the passage and see if there's anything else. Maybe there's a passage over here. I can use the glossary. They have workarounds. Maybe I'll put this in the parking lot and see if list that I have. I'll go back to my group or teacher and ask later. As long as it doesn't cause them any problems, maybe it will be addressed later. Look, there's all these strategies that they can use. And they are like, I can do this. They're confident. And confidence comes from being successful in previous lessons. It's not, oh, well, the parents build confidence. Of course they do. Sports will build confidence. Of course it will. But the real confidence in the classroom is going to come from teachers who teach kids well, and they succeed. And that builds, not just one success, but then builds. And then they're like that turtle. Okay, that worked. I'm going to poke my head out a little bit more. Okay, that works more. I'm going to be a little bit more confident. So as they get more and more successes, they become more and more confident. And they can handle the failure every now and then, the occasional. They're like, all right, let's work around it. But that kid who always fails, boom, first failure, they cut off, they're done. I'm done. So it goes back to your reflective journal writing that you wrote on. Why do some kids fall out? Why do they quit reading and doing homework? Hopefully you wrote in there, and don't go back and write it now, but hopefully you wrote in there somewhere that repeated failures, they got a script that says they can't do it. Now, we're America. We're the United States of America. We're supposedly the envy of the world, but over the last, 5, 6, 10 years, that's kind of diminished some. We're not doing real well in certain things. Why? Is it business? Well, partially. Is it everybody else is doing much better coming up? We hope so. But really, the reason why we're not doing as well, and that for the first time this generation is actually thinking they're not going to do as well as their parents, it's education. You know, we're not producing the quality students that some of our competitors are. We can build factories, but if we can't find a pool of folks in the United States to be able to do those jobs, there you go. You see the problem. But that's not really happening. Yes, the majority of U.S. students in grades 4, 8, and 12 have obtained, at best, only basic levels of literacy. Basic. Majority. I'm not talking about exceptional learners. I'm talking about the majority of U.S. students in grades 4, 8, and 12. Basic. That should worry you. You're part of that. And while they might be able to decode and read, it is those complex literacy tasks of analysis, of the logical arguments, of picking apart something and reconstructing it, looking for alternative meanings, synthesizing massive amounts of information, and formulating a particular conclusion that they can communicate. So the bottom line is they can kind of read fluently and accurately, woo! But if it's not an explicit question, they're having a hard time. And it goes back to that core of what you want all the time. Tell me exactly what you want me to do so I can obtain this A. A is excellent. Somebody who's an excellent, who earns an A, should be able to think, not just give me back the information, but should come up with it and take it in a direction that is interesting, unique, meaningful, without massive scaffolds. I know y'all are hard workers. But are you more than just basic? I'm not asking you to be worker bees all the time. I'm asking you to be something different. Because if you can't do it, you can't teach your kids to do it. So yeah, on the surface, looks like you're completely literate, but are you, again, back in your reflective journal that you were writing, did you list things other than a highlight? Did you do things like, I ask myself questions? I try to formulate my own multiple choice questions. I summarize what was said. Or are you kicking back and saying, that's too much work? Other folks are doing it. Other folks in your class are doing it. Definitely other folks in other countries are doing it. They're hungry. Are you? You know, and that's where we run into some problems with comprehension. All right. So why do students struggle with comprehension? Well, we're skillful. We're not strategic. We're skillful. We're just not strategic. What does that mean? We got the skills, but we're not applying it. We get to mastery, but we really don't go to enrichment and enhancement. So that's a problem. What do we do about it? Well, part of this is understanding what content literacy is. And it really does refer to that ability to read, write, talk, listen, view, to learn subject matter in a given discipline. Okay? What? It's your ability to use all of this. And not just read and write. But listen, that's content literacy. Yes. Okay? Content literacy involves the use of research-based cognitive learning strategies designed to support reading, writing, thinking, and learning with text. So what do you know as far as what the research says is a good way, is a good strategy to support reading, writing, and thinking? Know any? And if you don't, okay, that's kind of the purpose of this class. Okay? Make sense? But you got to be open to it, and then you have to actually do it. Look, big idea between this discipline literacy. What do you mean discipline literacy? Discipline literacy is different than just literacy, or it is specific to that discipline. It is that information, that content in science. Well, duh, it's really easy to say, okay, duh. Okay? But you have to remember that it is a way of thinking. So how do scientists in this field think? How do they synthesize information? Because that's very different than folks in math, okay, or in music, or in art. You have to understand the specific discipline, how they do things, how they, think like a historian, think like a scientist, think like a mathematician. Because it's not, okay, I'm just going to superimpose the language arts thinking to science, folks. There is some overlap, clearly. But if you think about it, how an artist utilizes literacy versus a physicist is going to have tons of overlap, similarities, but also some very distinct differences. And we need to be cognizant of that. We need to understand how that affects kids' ability to take the strategies they learn in language arts and superimpose them into their discipline or their content area courses. Okay? It's really the ability to understand, critique, and use knowledge from text in content areas. This approach to teaching, okay, is incredibly important because it integrates this rigorous content with how folks in that discipline think. They got to go hand in hand. Content determines process. What? Yes, content determines process. What content I'm teaching determines, in many ways, the thinking process. I'm going to think like a historian. I'm going to think like a astrologist. I'm going to think like a mathematician. I'm going to think like an artist. It has to unfold in that way. And that scares the heck out of us. Hang on, have a knocking at the door. All right, so we're back. But basically, disciplinary literacy is just, in a nutshell, is getting into the head of people in that discipline and how they construct meaning from the vast array of different literacy constructs that they have at their disposal. So a lot of it is, that content again determines process. So being able to go in and start thinking a little bit about, thinking like a historian. So let's jump in, and if you turn your attention to page 14, is they've done in Wisconsin this kind of very interesting project where it's called Think Like a Historian. And they said, okay, well, let's put together a variety of things that perpetuate thinking like a historian, that discipline of history. And they had some crucial and cores that they subscribe to. Cause and effect makes sense. Cause, this was the cause. Here's the effect. Here's the cause of the Declaration of Independence. Here's the effect that it had. Change and continuity. What changed and what remained the same. So we implement these things, the Declaration of Independence. What change occurred and what pretty much stayed the same. And then turning points. What, you can do these things, but what were the turning points? And through their eyes, this is that empathy, critical thinking exercise. Let's try to look not through your eyes in their situation, but through their eyes in their situation, and then using the past. These are all, if you go back to Cohen's work, these are a lot of the big ideas that we use. Cause and effect is very similar to scientific methodology, which is a huge big idea in science, but these are really interesting things. So that being said, what I want you guys to do is get your internet up and running, and I want you to go to this webpage, and you don't have to do it right this second. I'm going to take you through it, and then I'm going to want you guys to engage in this activity. But it is www.wisconsinhistory.org. Think like a historian, and I guess that's case dependent. If you don't have that, quick Google search should be able to get that. And if we could, there's an instructional video that we can look down here, and it involves these kids going through this. I want you to get your reflective journal out, okay? And I want you to take certain notes during that. It can be specifics that they are doing, but also it could be your thoughts, perceptions, the kids' perceptions. Prior to looking at that video, there's two kind of posters that help you with those big ideas that we just kind of went in, and it's pretty interesting. So pop that up and have that by your side when you're looking at the video, and then a little bit easier, kind of whatever floats your boat as far as makes that information easier for you to kind of look at. And then just click on your instructional video. Okay. And it's long, it's like 15-20 minutes, but go through the whole thing, and then basically, again, use your journal, reflect any conclusions that you come up with. So go ahead and go through that, and then let's come back and we'll use that as a basis of what we are going to talk about in class. But again, make sure you go through the entire video. So if you have a slow internet connection, you might want to go to the library and do this, but it should be very interesting. I'm interested in seeing what you guys come up with. All right? So go ahead, go do that. Now, I guess you are back. You've watched the Think Like a Historian. You're starting to understand this notion of disciplinary literacy, and while there's definitely overlaps with content with traditional literacy, clearly being able to understand the discipline's way of thinking, makes a lot of sense. Going back and, cause and effect, very similar to a science discipline. But change in continuity or turning points or through their eyes, maybe it might not be as important in the cognitions of a scientist versus a historian. So there will be very different attributes that will help with that literacy of that particular discipline. So let's continue on. Oops. Now we've got the idea of what literacy content is, and then discipline specific, and we're feeling fairly good about it. But again, it's that whole progress monitoring then becomes somewhat of an issue. So I want us to go into looking again at the RTI model. We are going to spend a little bit more time on this in subsequent chapters, and clearly with the RTI for diverse learners that you have for readings for tomorrow, or the second class period, we'll go much more into detail. But if we remember that the ultimate goal for disciplinary literacy is that all students would develop that kind of deep, rich content knowledge and literate habits, and that they are going to think in the context of that specific, discipline in a very deep, I know vaccach use rigorous learning, but that real deep learning. Remember, where our quest is not to be a river wide and shallow, but our quest is to be a river maybe deep and narrow, and that we can kind of start placing more of an emphasis on how these skills can be generalized to other disciplines. And we can do that better if we understand how those disciplines, think and how they approach literacy. So, but the problem is how do we know if what we're doing is actually, effective? And it doesn't matter what content that we're talking about. It could even be behavior. I mean, clearly in the 565 class, we talk a lot about BRTI, behavior response to intervention, and that takes a big chunk of the course. But that's clearly also that has an academic focus in reading, language arts, in any content that is, in essence, being taught. Some of this is kind of repetition for you. You know a lot of this. But really the goal of RTI is to assess the teaching. A lot of times we say, oh, it's to assess students. Well, it is, but it's really to either, validate what we taught or to point us in the direction of where we need to kind of tighten that up a little bit. And we can identify at-risk learners, and an at-risk learner is any kid that didn't master the content and that we're asking them to apply. And then we can kind of catch them up and do some mini lessons and some tier 2 stuff, and then get them right back in there. If we systematically monitor students' progress, that formative CBA assessments, curriculum-based assessments or curriculum-based measures, kind of become the image that we see in RTI as far as the data assessment. And then that will lend ourselves very nicely to go in and say, this group of kids or this individual child needs something additional, either at a tier 2 level, or if that falls out, at a tier 3 level, something significantly different. But a tier 1 is, think of it in terms of just good, solid instruction. And that's a key variable, is that it has to be evidence-based instruction that everyone, for the most part, is getting. We know how to do it. There's evidence to support that we should be using this program or method. And we have a procedure in place to assess whether our kids are getting it. It's just what everybody's getting in general ed. Now, kids fall out for a variety of reasons. They were sick. They missed 10 days. They have gaps in their learning. They don't understand why this, what we're trying to ask them to do. It's just blowing their mind a little bit. And they need something in addition to what is generally provided in tier 1. And that could be, where we sit down, where their data shows they're falling out. They're becoming flat as far as their learning. And we sit down and we say, well, we need to give some additional time, or we need to rethink how maybe we're teaching them, or provide a specialist to come in and maybe assist them. But it is a comprehensive plan. You've graduated to tier 2 when a group of people are sitting down and discussing, okay, this child fell out. In tier 1 kids, can fall out a little bit and the teacher just moves their desk forward, or asks them more questions or provides a mini lesson. That's just good teaching. And that's what good teachers do throughout the nation. Tier 2 is a little bit more involved. It's definitely not child study. It's definitely not, okay, we're thinking about this child as an exceptional learner, we're going to go to eligibility. This is, more along the lines of, this child needs something in addition to. So with that being said, I can go back and kind of correct myself and say, we are studying the child, but not in the context that a lot of people interpret what is child study. Well, child study is the first step for eligibility in SPED. No, it's not. Child study is, we're just going to study this child. He or she is not responding to the tier 1. So we're going to sit down, we're going to take a look at our data, we're going to take a look at our teaching, and we're going to develop something maybe specific for these kids in hopes of keeping them out of eligibility. So it's really the antithesis of, okay, child study is the first step into special ed. No, it's really trying to prevent them from going into that eligibility. So it's general ed, and special ed can be involved, and we hope they are, but it's really general ed sitting down and saying, what we're doing in the classroom just not working. We need to do something else. And that something else could be professional development for the teacher. It could be maybe the teaching, the instruction is failing the child. It could be, some different interventions for that kid. It could be additional time, an extra period with a literacy specialist. It could be the literacy specialist coming in, the reading coach coming in and helping during that content instruction, teaching them the strategies, or at least probably not initial acquisition of those strategies, but kind of reminding and prompting and kind of working out the bugs. But it's a plan. Once we get a special plan for a kid that everybody agrees upon, and we're also like, okay, this is how we're going to measure it, then we go and we start implementing it. And come back and figure out when we're going to monitor to see if it's successful. And if the kid is successful and everything is, hunky-dory, then great. And if we can fade the supports of tier 2, even better. And they're back in tier 1 and everything is right as rain, and this kid chugs along and feels good about life. But it also may be an indication that, this isn't working either. And we might have to do something more intensive. In 565, that more intensive is a functional behavior assessment with a behavior intervention plan, with a clear data plan in place. Tier 3 could be special ed. It's definitely not relegated. It could be eligibility. It could also be very intensive, more severe, intensive instruction. It could be a different program. It could be a different way of teaching altogether. It could be a different environment where the child receives their instruction. It could be a variety of things. So these tiers, by the very nature of flow, which some people view it as a triangle here and others say, well, you need to invert it, whatever helps you understand the concept better. The tier is really, 80% tier 1, maybe 12, 15%, 10% in tier 2, maybe 5 to 7% in tier 3. If we can get those numbers manageable, we can handle, because we can reduce the number of folks that are in tier 3 or in special education if we have a well-developed tier 2. Even that's either behavior or in academic. But the key variables that have to be in place is you've got to have, a progress monitoring component that's in place. All right, so IDEA, it is controversial. How does this affect? A lot of you have heard some of the dialogue about, well, RTI is dismantling, the SPED process. It's replacing IQ achievement discrepancy. It's going to eradicate learning disabled. And there's lots of people that, quite frankly, that's what they want to do. They think that why do we need to have SPED if we give them the same thing based on an RTI model, and we can prevent that stigmatizing kids with putting a label on them. I think we kind of did something like that prior to the inception of special education, and these kids were ostracized, and I think if they are disabled, then they're entitled. Their fate entitles them to a free and appropriate public education. And quite frankly, special education is, while not perfect, is probably better at providing that fate than just straight out general ed with some supports pushed in. But we have to be strong advocates. That doesn't mean if I subscribe to RTI that I'm advocating for eradication of special ed or even the identification IQ achievement discrepancy. I think there's some real problems with IQ achievement discrepancy as a model for identifying LD kids. There has to be a discrepancy, so there's a weight to fail. Their IQ is high, their achievement is low, and therefore it could possibly be a disability causing that. It could be a variety of other things that cause that, but it could definitely be the disability that caused that IQ achievement discrepancy. But, who wants to wait that long? I see them being able to work in conjunction. An RTI formative evaluation and a much more intensive, I don't want to say summative, but definitely robust assessment that measures many more things, cognitive and achievement, IQ achievement, discrepancy model has a place. I just don't think we have to put our eggs in both in one camp or the other, or basket or the other. We just need to, all right, here's some assessment tools we have in place. How can we actively find these kids? RTI makes a lot of sense. Again, you could hear 10 other SPED folks say, no, it's the worst thing ever. Again, you're going to have to synthesize through that, and you're going to have to process, and you're going to have to figure out where you're going to be on this. But it is going to be something that you have to deal with. Yeah, people I think, are naive in some ways of saying that RTI and TEARS is going to take care of a disability. RTI model clearly can show that this kid isn't getting it, but he could get it at an ID kid could get it at the same rates as an LD kid. But are we really saying that we're going to teach them exactly the same way? Because their raw scores may be exactly the same, but the treatments needed to address that are going to be very much different. And instead of reinventing the wheel with every kid, labels do pass along some information that kind of help us. Yeah, no one likes them in some ways, but in other ways, it sure does speed up the process, and it can allow for some information. It can also be abused and stigmatized and low expectations placed, but that's not part of the process. That's part of the implementation of the process. So, RTI can help with that a great deal. So, what are some school-wide assessments needed to identify struggling learners? Well, those are the things that we were kind of talking about. There's systematic screening for behavior disorders that we could look at for behaviors. There's all sorts of assessments, formal and informal, norm reference, criterion reference, that we can use as a school to say, okay, we're monitoring or we're screening some kids. You've got to have those tiered interventions. You can't just say, we're going to push in during language arts. That's the only thing we're going to do. There has to be an opportunity for not even pull out additional time. If someone comes up to you and says, well, okay, is your tier 2 push in or pull out? I would be very worried if the answer is, well, neither or both. I worry about interventions occurring solely during the tier 1 instruction, because it might help them with this, but at the same time it might be problematic in obtaining the new information that's being taught. There just has to be opportunities for additional time. Time is a variable in tier 2 that has to happen. And scheduling and logistics is a problem. A lot of people are like, yes, we know we need to do this, but logistically I don't have the people to look. The thing that I have found is get behind the idea that this kid needs additional time. The logistics work themselves. It's when you're not behind the idea that it's when you let logistics, manpower, time, that's when it kills an idea. I think it's a cop-out in some ways. It's legitimate concerns, but it's a cop-out, and it's because they're saying, I don't necessarily believe in this. I've always found it might not be the best, perfect situation. I have to answer this, so hang on one second. All right, we're back. We being me. So, starting with this notion of reading to learn, and let's jump over there. There's a great deal of things that influence students' content literacy. And again, it goes back to prior knowledge. What's their background knowledge? Their attitude toward and interest in a subject. Now again, a lot of people interpret this as we must only pair things they know or are similar to them. Those are the only things that they're going to be interested in. And while that is partially true, they're going to be interested in things they're interested in. Part of us is to expose and to introduce them to new things. So, interest in the subject can be, built through these anticipatory sets of some sort of, talking about this activity maybe they don't have a lot of experience with, but it kind of piques their interest, especially if it can ride on top of something that they are interested in. They love baseball, let's learn about cricket. Maybe a bit of a stretch, but there you go. The learner's purpose for engaging in reading, writing, and discussion, the vocabulary and concept difficulty of the text material. Nothing kills interest more than presenting them with a reading passage that isn't even close to their reading level. Even if it's a very interesting topic, if they can't read and comprehend that particular passage, then obviously they're not going to continue with it. The assumption that text writers make about the audience of readers, structures of the text have a lot, like how they organize information. If you have a very type A person and this stuff is just a free thinking, free association kind of, it might be very challenging, especially without any setup. Okay, this is going to be a very different type of passage. And most importantly, or more importantly than many, is that teachers' beliefs and attitudes towards the content, towards learning, a variety of things. So, that being said, what do they have to do to be able to successfully comprehend this stuff? It's pretty simple. They got to be able to decode and fluently decode that. I mean, if you just get this kid to read a passage and they are very disfluent, trust me, there's not a lot of comprehension going on. They must be able to decode or pronounce these words. And if they're not, go back to that instruction. Wait, but I don't want to. I'm fifth grade. I shouldn't have. This is where this kid is. You got to give decoding instruction. Then you got to use tools that develop the decoding and fluency ability of kid as quick as possible, whether you like it or not. So they have to read with this fluency. Fluency is being able, with academic text, meet workplace demand. All right, the decoding fine, but the pacing is low. There's no any kind of emotion within their words, but their fluency is okay. But is that how you want them to read? And if not, then you have to teach that inflection. We have to activate their vocabulary knowledge. A lot of times that we can do that with, here's a list of words, what do you think is going to happen? And then use text comprehension strategies that have taught explicitly. If they struggle in that decoding, and I want to go back to it, with a lot of reading errors, mispronunciations, omissions, substitutions. Omissions is they're not following along very well. Substitutions, a lot of times, is they're guessing at words, not decoding them. This is going to cause a lot of cognitive confusion. They're going to, wait a minute, what did I say? If they just substitute some words, it really will limit their ability to process because they're spending so much time on the decoding. You have X amount of attention you can attune to different things. And if a great deal of it is spent on the actual letter sound and there's not any automaticity, they're still decoding. Automaticity is they're still decoding, but it's so fluent, so quick that it almost appears that it's sight word, but it's not. They're still decoding. It's just very automatic. And, it's kind of like driving. At first you were like, holding, and now you wake up 30 minutes have passed and you're like, wait a minute, where am I? It's just automatic, and that comes through practice and rehearsal and just hours behind the steering wheel. Same thing with hours behind the book, it becomes very automatic. But if they're not at that automaticity, then they're going to have to allocate a lot of cognitive processing time to decoding, which means it's not freed up for these higher order thinking kind of things that we really want them to do. And so it's best to get them as fluent as possible with tools that get them as fluent as possible. So back to your journals now. We have our next one, so it's down here. And I want you to describe some of the reading strategies you use to successfully complete an academic reading assignment. What are some of the strategies for writing papers or essays that are going to be graded? What are just some of the things that you do? In 689 we went through that whole coding thing. But what are some of the strategies that you do? So just kind of bullet and list those out for me, okay? All right, so now we're back, and this kind of highlights some of the things that we were saying before on page 20, is that they've spent so much time kind of trying to say the word that comprehension suffers a great deal. So what are good readers? What are they actually doing that makes them good readers? They've got a goal. You know, I mean, that list right here, they're active, purposeful, they evaluate, they're thoughtful, they're strategic, persistent, and productive. That's all great. But really, what do they do? When they read, they have a goal in mind. Why am I reading this? And it's not because it's the assignment. And sometimes it's a greater goal, and to get that greater goal, I want to, I want to pass my bus driving test. So you got to read road safety. They're not reading road safety to, improve their fluency just because it was assigned. It's because they have this greater goal of, I would like to be able to drive this bus, and I've got to be able to pass this test, and so I'm going to study. So, sometimes what is their goal? They are going to look over the text before they read. Killer strategy. They look, they go through it. Some of you do that in the test. You're like, oh, we got to read chapter 1, so, how much do I got to read? How many pages? Okay, well, that's kind of a start. How many pages, so I know how much time to allocate. But then you kind of look, and you look at important things and see how much you've got to read. Some of you go through a text and you say, all right, I'm going to get a true count of how many pages I have to read. So that's a table. So this is only half a page. Oh, and there's another table, and that's only, I love this page. It's only this much. So really my 30 pages is only, 8 pages. And it's probably not the best thing to do, but, and then you start skipping these tables, which you probably would skip this one right here. Because it's not a text. It's probably not a great strategy, but they do look over it. They're going to look at the structure of the text and sections that seem to be pretty interesting. And then they're going to start predicting, what's this thing going to be about? And then, quite frankly, they are going to read selectively. Continue making decisions about their reading, what to read carefully and what to maybe browse over. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just don't want to do the strategy of all tables can be and figures can be completely ignored. Forget this figure, forget this. It's not a great strategy. But you might not read, you might just spend a little bit of time on this and spend a great deal more time on certain texts. So, that's really important. They do construct revised questions. They try to determine the meaning of unfamiliar words, in the text prior to looking them up or Googling them. So, they become more independent. Now, all of these things constitutes an investment in the text. So if they're doing all of these things, they are investing their time, which means it has meaning. They are not passive learners. They're active. They are invested. They have earned a job to pay for the bike. So they're going to take care of that bike. And they have engaged in and invested in this passage, so they're going to take care of this reading passage. They're going to think about the author's purpose in the text, their styles, their beliefs. Am I being led down a path? Am I going to do it passively, or I'm going to take some of these other things that I've read that maybe conflict? When you read vaccach, you really should be comparing, contrasting it with, with Hades' book, with visible learning. What are some things that are in conflict? You are going to, I've kind of given you an assignment where you are going to compare and contrast, Comenius and vaccach's take on language arts. So you shouldn't just passively, well, vaccach said this, so it's real. That's what vaccach said. But, Coin might have said this. And, Carnine might have said this. And Connie Jewell might have said this. Now I got to synthesize all of this and come up with some sort of conclusions. They're going to monitor their understanding. All of us have read a passage and, oh my God, what did I just read? And we have to kind of do our little good DRTAs, just sit back. What did I just read? So let me summarize it. That's that interaction that really kind of helps. Then come up with some conclusions. Is this text worth anything? Did I get anything out of it? Did it just conflict with a lot of things and not in a good way? And you're going to read different texts differently. You're going to read your vaccach text very differently than you are, this. This is a resource. You're going to read the first 15 pages of this, very similar to vaccach, but then it's just, you're not going to read from beginning to end. This is a resource, a different, a resource in the sense of I'm going to find the strategy that solves a problem that I'm facing right now. I'm not going to read cover to cover, this RTI for diverse learners. Because that's not the intent of this book. It is, read the first 15, 20 pages, get an understanding, then you're just going to grab those different tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 interventions based upon what your needs are. You're going to revise your summaries clearly, and you're going to think again about the text, beginning, prior to, during, and after. You do all this, your comprehension is going to shoot, but we don't do it because it takes too much time. I'm just going to read this. And it does take a lot of time to begin with. Is any new skill, when you first do it in initial acquisition, it's jagged, it's bumpy, it's problematic, and sometimes the results aren't really all that obvious. So, we give up on it. But if we continue to use the strategy, it becomes much more fluid. And it's almost automatic, very similar to decoding. At first, it's a very laborious process. Mom. Then it gets, as we practice more, mom, say it fast, mom, mom. Then it becomes automatic, mom. And we spend less and less time, we have to allocate less and less time to engage in that strategy because it's just very fluid, very automatic. Well, it's the same thing here. If you do these things, these strategies, at first it's going to slow you down. It's much quicker just to use your old strategies. It's much quicker for your students to use their old strategies. And in some ways, it might even be, at least initially, more effective for them to use their old strategies. So you got to think about that during grading time. And they might be very tempted to go back to their old strategies. But with time and with practice, it replaces their old ineffective strategies. And and the natural reinforcers is that they comprehend better, that we have to kind of point out, man, you're really remembering this stuff. You really went into much more detail, You get this. You're able to generalize this great into this other content. It's awesome. We might have to make those natural reinforcers very obvious. But some of them they get. Their grades are better, But we're so quick. We don't invest. We want things to be immediate. If I do this strategy, my life should get 100% better right now. Right now. And that's just unrealistic. That's that kind of United States mentality. If I put in a minimal amount of effort, I should get a huge return. If I put in granite countertops in my kitchen, I should flip the house for $40,000 more. It's just ridiculous. Investment is long-term and long-term goals. And sometimes it's somebody saying, do this, do this. And there's tears and everything else. And we're like, oh, we don't want the pit. We make decisions based on the short-term outcomes. I don't want to do chemo. I like my hair. That's just ludicrous. But we do that in education. The kid must immediately feel good. And so we enable them by providing way too much support. So, have in mind, have your vision that if they engage in these things, okay, and I teach them systematically how to do them and monitor progress and show that I'm doing them too and prompt them, that eventually they'll get them. And life will be better. They might not like it during initial acquisition. Oh well. Not everything is immediate. Okay? Making sense? Hope everybody's good. All right, let's go to our questions. All right. Go ahead and pull out your sheet of paper for your multiple choice questions. And, okay, from a strategic point of view, a reader's main goal is to make sense out of what is read, read text assignments, answer assigned questions, participate in class discussions. So from a strategic point of view, a reader's main goal is to what? Make sense, read text assignments, answer assigned questions, or participate in class discussion. All right? Number 6, reading is an active process and skilled activity because the students pick apart that question. Don't just passively listen to what I'm saying. Reading is an active process and skilled activity because the student should physically interact with the book, needs to be at a certain reading level in order to comprehend, has a conversation with the author and raises questions while reading, must decode and comprehend subskills. Okay, get your answers there. Next one, question 7. A successful reader utilizes all but one of the following strategies. Reads different types of texts differently, questions and revises meanings constructed while reading, rereads text when finished reading, predicts and verifies predictions while reading. So they're going to do all of those, but which one? Question 8. The findings of the report of the National Reading Panel conclude that struggling readers benefit from implicit instruction in the use of strategies. Yeah, we can't do this one. Skip this one because the answer was D, but you can't see it. So we're going to skip that one. Okay. And we'll hold off on that one. All right. So we're feeling pretty good so far. We're almost at the end of this chapter, so hang in there. We know that, this effective comprehension instruction includes a lot of things, and we want to make sure that we understand that instruction can be effective in helping students develop a repertoire of strategies, a whole bunch of strategies that fosters and promotes, comprehension. Remember, good readers, when stumped, because everybody gets stumped, chooses a different strategy. And if they don't have a whole bunch of different strategies in their repertoire of strategies, then they're kind of stuck doing the same thing. And that strategy instruction should be integrated into, subject matter, discipline-specific literacies, because that will help improve the comprehension of that text. Struggling readers benefit from explicit instruction in the use of those strategies. Look, you're a science teacher, but you might have to hold off teaching science, teaching the strategies that come directly from people in the field of science, their discipline-specific literacy. How do they think? Process leads what? Discipline leads to process. Okay, we need to make sure that we're inhaling that and feeling pretty good. And once we know those strategies, explicitly teach them. That means explicitly is step-by-step. Task analysis, teach to mastery, then have them apply. Vocabulary knowledge is important because it is strongly related to the text. So if I can just pull out those words, go over them, that has meaning. It's important to teach, especially English language learners, the vocabulary that is going to be used. Effective comprehension strategies such as question generation, question answering routines, comprehension monitoring, cooperative learning, summarizing. Cooperative learning is sitting around and just kind of talking about a passage sometimes as example, and those wonderful graphic organizers, and understanding different text structures. These are all good comprehension strategies that any good comprehension program should fully utilize. And students are going to benefit from exposure to two different types of genres. An informative, a narrative. The two genres aren't fiction, nonfiction. I mean, look, there's a lot of genres. And getting down to 7, makes a lot of sense. And exposure to those. And we do want to always provide choice. Challenging tasks. Okay, high expectations. All these things increase motivation for students to go ahead and do these things. Okay? Don't worry about this response journal. Everybody feeling good? All right. Last major thing that we're going to talk about in this chapter is, and we've already kind of addressed it in many ways, is the whole notion of schema. And look, it's just what you know about the world. You grew up in a certain lifestyle, a certain way of doing things, and you acquired a bunch of information and perspectives. And, both of you guys can get the same information, but somebody that grew up here in this situation and somebody who grew up in this situation, getting the exact same information could interpret it very differently. And the reason is because you grew up differently. It's not right or wrong, okay? It's how you interpret that new information and how you're going to organize it. And, the great thing is that we see two different things, and we should allow, and it's we see the same thing by two different folks and interpreted very different ways. The beauty of that is that we can elaborate, and kind of ebb and flow, grow through each other's interpretation. And as long as we respect that it's not a right or wrong thing, it's a thing, that is great. I mean, if we just imagine how well functioning our government would be if it wasn't so, this massive pardon. Okay? Whatever my party is how I think. And, if we could just get these groups to, okay, this is what I'm bringing, but now let's elaborate on it. It makes a whole lot more sense. But if we're just trying to go right and wrong, then arguments. I guess that builds to some degree your ability to debate, but kind of brings everything down. So, all right, woo, chapter 1 done. What I do want you to do is I want you to go to now as an activity, and the final activity for this particular chapter is I want you to go to Literacy Matters website and click on those lesson plans. Okay, so let me just click on it. Oops, too much. So just go to literacymatters.com, and then you can kind of look at a particular grade level. So, and then you can see some different lesson plans, and just select a lesson plan. It doesn't matter what. That's appropriate to whatever content that you're interested in. And then based on everything that we kind of talked about here, do an older grade, not K1, 2, but do like a 4th or 5th or something along those lines. And it doesn't matter what content, but you want to go in and just evaluate it. Based on what we did here, what are some things that are aligned with what we talked about in chapter 1 and things that are not aligned? Okay, that concludes. Hope everything is fine. You have finished your, no, we still have a couple questions. Let's get those through finish quickly. So number 9, use of literacy strategies in content area classes is intended to do all of the following except activate students' background knowledge, teach students how to read, provide a way for students to clarify information, help students extend their understanding of subject area material. Okay, and the final question. According to, the schema theory, which of the following strategies will least influence comprehension? Organizing text, making inferences, decoding unknown words, elaborating on information. Okay? Well, that's where we are. We have now finished our first assignment. I sure hope that helped you with your reading. But please make sure that you continue with the other chapters, and we'll start with our case studies in class. All right, well, thanks a lot, and I will have to figure out how to turn this off. Take care.